The first thing I remember is the cold. Not the cold of the linoleum floor pressing against my cheek, not the cold of the February air slipping through the gap under the back door. It was a different kind of cold, the kind that starts somewhere behind your sternum and spreads outward slowly, like ink dropped into still water. I remember thinking very clearly, in that strange, calm way your mind works when your body has already decided something is very wrong, I should not be on this floor. I had been reaching for the iron skillet on the top shelf of my kitchen cabinet, the same skillet I had used every Sunday morning for 31 years to make the kind of scrambled eggs that my late husband, Robert, used to say were the only reason he ever got out of bed on a weekend. I was 63 years old. I had worked 30 years as a registered nurse. I had seen more medical emergencies in my lifetime than most people see in a television series, and none of that prepared me for the way my left knee simply gave out without warning and sent me sideways into the counter and then down onto the floor with the kind of impact that takes your breath away so completely that for several seconds you cannot even scream. I lay there. I counted the ceiling tiles the way I used to count them in exam rooms during difficult shifts, just to stay grounded. 14. There were 14 tiles, and the one directly above the refrigerator had a water stain shaped vaguely like the state of Florida. I could not get up. I had dropped my phone when I fell. I could see it from where I was lying. It had slid under the kitchen table, maybe 4 feet away. Those 4 feet might as well have been 4 miles. Every time I tried to push myself upright, a pain shot from my left hip all the way up through my spine that made my vision go white at the edges. After the third attempt, I stopped trying and just lay there on the cold floor of my kitchen in Dayton, Ohio, on a Sunday morning in February, listening to the refrigerator hum. I thought about my son. His name is Derek, and he is 38 years old, and he lives 40 minutes away in a house I helped him buy the down payment for 7 years ago when his first marriage fell apart and he needed a fresh start. I thought about him the way you think about a person when you need them, and you already know, somewhere beneath the hoping, that they are not coming. Eventually, I dragged myself across that floor. It took me the better part of 20 minutes, and I am not going to describe what that felt like because some things do not need to be described. I reached my phone. I called 911, and then I lay back on the cold linoleum and I waited, and I looked at the 14 ceiling tiles, and I thought about scrambled eggs. The paramedics were kind. The ER doctor was efficient. The orthopedic surgeon who came in 2 hours later and told me I had fractured my femoral neck and would need surgery was apologetic in the practiced way that doctors become apologetic when they have delivered this kind of news enough times that it no longer surprises them, but they still remember that it surprises you. "Is there someone we should call?" the intake nurse asked me. She was young, maybe 25. With a dark braid and the kind of unhurried patience that tells you she was still new enough to the job to genuinely mean it. I gave her my son's number. That was Sunday morning at 9:47. By Sunday evening, they had called him 22 times. I did not know this yet. I was still in pre-op, and they had given me something for the pain that made the edges of the room soft and watercolor blurry, and I kept thinking he was probably just at the gym or in the shower or somewhere with bad reception. Derek was busy. Derek had always been busy. He had a good job now, something in corporate logistics that I had never fully understood despite him explaining it to me at least a dozen times over the years, and he traveled a lot, and sometimes he forgot to charge his phone. There were reasonable explanations. I was very focused on the reasonable explanations. He did not come. I woke up from surgery at 11:14 that night, and the first thing I did before I even asked for water was look toward the door. There was no one there. The nurse on duty, a heavy-set man named Gerald with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, told me gently that they had not been able to reach my emergency contact. He said it the way people say things they know are going to land badly, carefully and a little too quietly. I nodded. I said that was fine. Gerald brought me ice chips and turned the television on low, and I watched the ceiling and counted the acoustic tiles and did not cry. Because I had been a nurse for 30 years, and I understood that crying in hospitals is something you do after, not during. 38. That was the number I found out later. They had called my son's number 38 times over 40 hours. They left voicemails. They sent a text message through the hospital's patient communication system. At some point on Monday afternoon, someone called the non-emergency line for the police in his district to request a wellness check because no one could rule out that something had happened to him. Something had happened to him. All right. I found out about it from my neighbor. Her name is Carol, and she lives 3 houses down from me on Sycamore Drive, and she is 39 years old, which means I was already a working nurse with a toddler at home when she was born. She has 2 kids in elementary school and a husband who works nights at the hospital. Actually, he's a respiratory therapist, which is how she knew to come. He had heard through the staff grapevine on Monday morning that a patient in orthopedic recovery had no family with her. An older woman, name matched the address he recognized from the neighborhood. He texted Carol. Carol showed up at my room at 11 in the morning on Monday with a tote bag containing a crossword puzzle book, a container of homemade vegetable soup, and a phone charger. I had not cried yet. I cried when she walked in. She sat with me for 4 hours that first day. She came back Tuesday. She brought her youngest with her on Wednesday, a 6-year-old named Lily, who sat in the chair beside my bed and narrated the entire plot of a movie she had seen recently with great seriousness and almost no accuracy. And it was the best conversation I had in all 4 days I was in that hospital. It was Carol who showed me. I don't know if she meant to. We were sitting together on Tuesday evening, and she had her phone out because she was texting her husband about pickup arrangements for the kids, and she set it down on the bed tray for a moment while she adjusted my pillow, and I saw the screen. Derek's Facebook page was open. He had changed his privacy settings years ago, but he had never unfriended Carol because they had met at a neighborhood block party once, and she was not a person people thought to unfriend. She was just Carol. Everybody had forgotten she was connected to everybody. The photo was posted Monday at 6:47 p.m. My son was standing in front of the Bellagio fountains in Las Vegas, Nevada, holding a drink the color of a traffic cone, wearing a shirt I had never seen before, grinning so wide you could count his back teeth. His arm was around a colleague I recognized from his company Christmas party 2 years ago. The caption said, "Finally celebrating the big promotion. Vegas, baby. Work hard, play harder." There were 67 comments. They said things like, "You deserve this," and "King behavior," and "Get it." The post had been made at 6:47 p.m. on Monday. I had come out of surgery on Sunday night. I had been lying in that recovery room for 19 hours at that point. I handed Carol her phone back and I said, very quietly, "Would you mind if we didn't talk for a few minutes?" She said, "Of course." She picked up her crossword puzzle book and she did not say another word, and I lay there in that hospital bed, and I looked out the window at the gray February sky over Dayton, Ohio, and I understood something that I think I had been carefully not understanding for a very long time. He knew. That is the part that took me the longest to process, and it is the part that I keep coming back to even now. He knew because the hospital had left voicemails. They do not leave vague voicemails, they identify themselves. They state the nature of the contact. They ask the emergency contact to call back urgently. He had those voicemails on his phone. He went to Vegas anyway. He took photos in front of fountains. He celebrated with his colleagues and posted it for the world to see, while his 63-year-old mother woke up alone from hip surgery in a hospital 40 minutes from his house. He called on Wednesday, not because he had finished celebrating and checked his voicemails. Not because guilt had finally crept in around the edges of the good time. He called because his ex-wife, his first ex-wife, a sensible woman named Patricia, who I have always liked and who still sends me Christmas cards, had seen the Facebook post and had called him directly to tell him what people in his circle were apparently already saying about it. The phone rang while Carol was there. I looked at the screen. I showed it to Carol. Then I set it face down on the bed tray and let it ring. It rang 4 more times that day. I was not ready. A nurse named Beverly, who had been rotating through my room since Monday and who had the kind of face that belongs to a person who has seen everything and forgotten nothing, said to me on Wednesday evening while she was checking my vitals, "Your son finally called." It was not a question. She had seen the name on my phone screen. "Yes," I said. "You gonna call him back?" "Eventually," I said. She wrote something on her tablet. Then she looked at me over the top of it with the expression of a woman who has worked orthopedic recovery for 15 years and has her own opinions about adult children who don't show up. She said, "You had a good surgery. You're going to heal just fine. You know that, right?" I said I knew that. "Good," she said, and moved on to the next room. Carol drove me home on Thursday. She had arranged everything. She had called the home health agency. She had coordinated with my insurance. She had done all of it quietly and without being asked while I was still in the hospital trying to remember how to walk with a walker. Her husband had gone over to my house and turned up the heat and put fresh sheets on the bed in my downstairs guest room so I would not have to manage the stairs right away. Derek showed up at my front door on Friday afternoon. He was tan. That was the first thing I noticed. He had that specific kind of desert tan you get when you spend 3 days near a pool in Nevada in February. He was wearing a jacket I didn't recognize, and he smelled like a hotel lobby, that particular combination of expensive soap and recirculated air conditioning that clings to you for days after you fly home. He stood on my porch and he said, "Mom, I'm so sorry." I looked at him through the storm door. I had my walker in front of me. My left hip throbbed with each heartbeat in a way that the pain medication took the edge off but did not entirely eliminate. I said, "Come in, Derek." He sat at my kitchen table, the same table I had dragged myself to, the same 4 feet, and he explained. There was a lot of explaining. There was a conference that had already been paid for, and a promotion that only happens once, and a phone that had died on the first night, and the charger he borrowed was for a different model and didn't work properly. And by the time he found a charger that worked, he had seen the voicemails, but the surgery was already over, and he thought I was okay, and he didn't want to ruin the trip for his colleagues, and it was only 3 days, and he knew I was in good hands. He knew I was in good hands. He had 38 missed calls from a hospital on his phone, and he had decided, from 650 miles away, that I was in good hands. I let him finish. I am 63 years old, and I spent 30 years as a nurse, and I have sat across from people in their hardest moments, and I know how to be still. I let him finish, and then I was quiet for a moment, and then I said, "Thank you for coming." He looked relieved. He shouldn't have. "I need to rest now," I said. "Carol is coming by this afternoon. I'll call you when I'm feeling better." He left. He hugged me carefully around the walker before he went, and he smelled like that hotel lobby, and I stood in my doorway and watched him back out of my driveway, and I felt something settle into place inside me. Not anger. Not grief. Something quieter and more permanent than both of those things. I called my attorney on Monday. Her name is Susan, and she is 61 years old. And she has handled my legal affairs since Robert died 8 years ago and left me the house and the savings and the investment accounts that I had managed carefully ever since. She is the kind of attorney who asks exactly the right questions and then listens to the answers completely before she speaks, which is a rare quality in any person and particularly in lawyers. I told her what I wanted to do. She asked me the right questions. She listened. Then she said, "I can have the new documents ready in 2 weeks. I want to tell you about the house, because the house matters. Robert and I bought it in 1989 for $87,000. We put new windows in 1997. We redid the kitchen in 2004 with money we had saved for 3 years specifically for that purpose. Robert planted the oak tree in the backyard the year Derek was born, and it is now taller than the house. We raised our son in that house, and then Robert got sick, and I took care of him in that house for 2 years while continuing to work, and then he died in that house, in the bedroom upstairs, on a Tuesday morning in October, with me holding his hand. I have lived in that house alone for 8 years. The mortgage has been paid off since 2011. Based on the current market in our neighborhood, it is worth somewhere between $340,000 and $370,000. Derek had mentioned, on several occasions over the past few years, that the house was too big for me alone. He had mentioned, with the specific casualness of someone who has rehearsed the mention, that the market was good right now. He had brought up, twice, a senior living community in Centerville that had very nice amenities and wasn't as expensive as you'd think. I had smiled and changed the subject each time. The weeks passed. The physical therapy was difficult and then less difficult. Carol came by 3 times a week with food, real food. Not sympathy food, the kind of meals that tasted like someone had actually thought about what you might want to eat. Her daughter Lily had apparently decided that I was a person of great interest, and on Saturdays Carol would bring her along, and Lily would sit in the armchair by the window and tell me things about her teacher, about a disagreement she'd had with her friend about which of two TV shows was better, about a bird she had seen in the yard that she believed was sending her a message, though she was still working out what the message was. I started sleeping through the night again, somewhere around week 4. Derek called every few days. The calls were the careful, considerate kind, the calls a person makes when they are aware they have done something that requires visible effort to undo. He asked how I was feeling. He asked if I needed anything. He mentioned twice, with the same rehearsed casualness, that he could help me list the house if I ever decided I wanted to downsize. I said I was feeling well, thank you, and that I didn't need anything, thank you, and that I hadn't decided anything about the house. He came to visit once in March, on a Sunday afternoon. He brought flowers, which I appreciated, and a bottle of wine, which I also appreciated. He sat in the living room and we talked, and at some point he said, carefully, the way people say things they've been working up to for a while, "Mom, I really am sorry. About the hospital, I know I should have been there." I said, "I know you are." He said, I've been carrying that." I said, "I understand." He seemed like he felt better after that. He finished his wine and he kissed my cheek and he drove home. And I sat in the living room in Robert's old chair, and I thought about what it means to forgive someone versus what it means to make peace with who someone actually is. Those are not the same thing. I had learned that somewhere in the previous 8 weeks. Spring came slowly to Dayton that year. The oak tree in the backyard started putting out leaves in late March, tentative at first, the pale yellow-green of new growth, and then suddenly, all at once in April, it was fully out, and the yard was in shade again, and I stood at the back window one morning with my coffee, walking without the walker now, just a cane for uneven ground, and I thought about Robert planting that tree. He would have known what to do. Robert was not a complicated man, but he had a gift for clarity that I have always envied. He saw things as they were, not as he wanted them to be. It took me longer, but I got there. Susan called in April to tell me the documents were finalized and ready for my signature whenever I wanted to come in. I went in on a Thursday. I sat across from her desk. I read everything carefully, the way a nurse reads medication orders, slowly and completely, because once you have seen what happens when people don't read things carefully, you never stop reading carefully. I signed. Derek called me on a Saturday in May. He called at 7:43 in the morning, which was unusual. Derek did not call before 9 on weekends. The phone rang and I looked at the screen and I already knew, with the particular knowing that comes from 30 years of reading situations the way other people read text, that something had changed. He had talked to Susan. Not directly, Susan would never, but he had run into her husband at the hardware store, and they had made the kind of small talk that happens in a city like Dayton, where everyone has lived there long enough to know everyone else's orbit, and Susan's husband had said something vague about the property market, and Derek had asked a question, and the answer had not been the one he expected. He did not ask me about it directly on that call. He talked around it, the way he always talked around things that made him uncomfortable, with a kind of verbal circling that I had watched him do since he was 12 years old and had broken something he didn't want to tell me about. He said, "Mom, I've been thinking. I feel like we don't talk enough. I feel like I should be more present." I said, "That's a kind thought, Derek." He said he wanted to come for dinner that week. I said, "Of course." He came on Wednesday. He brought takeout from a Thai restaurant I like, and he was attentive and warm, and he helped clear the table, and he sat with me on the back porch afterward, and we watched the yard go dark, and he said, after a while, "Mom, I need to ask you something." I said, "All right." Susan's husband, he stopped, started again. "I heard something about the will." I said, "What did you hear?" He looked at me across the porch table, in the last of the evening light, and he looked younger than 38 in that moment, and older too, somehow, in the way that people look when they suddenly understand that something they counted on may not be there anymore. He said, "Is it true that you changed it?" I was quiet for a moment. The oak tree was very still. There was a cardinal in it somewhere. I could hear it but not see it in the dark. "Yes," I said. "I changed it." He was quiet. Then, to who? I've established a healthcare scholarship fund, I said. Through the hospital foundation, in your father's name. It will support nursing students who couldn't afford the program otherwise. He stared at me. And the house? He said. The house goes to Carol, I said, with the condition that she may live in it for as long as she chooses, and that Lily may use the backyard for as long as the oak tree stands. I had not told Carol this yet. I was going to tell her on Friday, when she came by with dinner. I was prepared for her to argue with me about it. She was the kind of person who argued with gifts. Derek sat across from me on the porch of the house where he grew up, and he did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, "Mom, I said I was sorry." "I know you did," I said. "I came back. I've been showing up." "You have," I said, "and I'm glad. I mean that, Derek. I want you in my life. I love you. That hasn't changed." "Then why?" "Because," I said, and I said it as gently as I could, "the way you say something that is true and permanent and needs to be heard clearly. I spent 40 hours on a hospital floor and in a recovery room, and the person who came to me was Carol. She came with soup. She brought her daughter. She sat with a crossword puzzle and didn't say anything when I needed quiet. She organized my home health before I even asked. She was there, Derek. And you were in front of a fountain with a drink in your hand." He looked away, toward the oak tree. "I'm not punishing you," I said. "I want you to understand that. I'm not angry. I've thought about this for months, and I'm not making this decision from anger. I'm making it from clarity." I paused. The house belongs with the people who belong in it. We sat on the porch for a long time after that. He didn't leave angry, which I had prepared myself for. He left quietly, which was harder in some ways. He kissed my cheek at the door, the same way he had in March, and I stood in the doorway and watched him go. And the night was warm and smelled like cut grass, and I went back inside and washed the takeout containers and went to bed and slept well. Carol cried when I told her. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table, always the same table, and she pressed both hands flat on the surface and she said, "Margaret, I can't accept this." I said, "You can and you will." She said, "This is your house." I said, "Yes, and I'm deciding what happens to it. That's what the law is for." I sat down across from her. "You have 2 kids and you work 2 jobs and your husband works nights and you showed up at my hospital room with homemade soup and a crossword puzzle because it was the right thing to do. I'm a retired nurse. I know what it means to just show up. It is not a small thing, Carol. It is not a small thing at all." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. After a while, she said, "Lily is going to lose her mind. She talks about this yard constantly." "I know," I said. "Tell her the oak tree is staying." Outside, beyond the kitchen window, the afternoon light was doing what afternoon light does in Ohio in May, coming in low and golden through the leaves, and the yard was very green, and somewhere in the oak tree the cardinal was making noise again. The same one I'd been hearing for weeks, loud and completely sure of itself, which I had always thought was the right way to be if you were going to be a cardinal. I have a good life. I want to be clear about that, because this is not a story about a sad woman. I walk every morning now, 2 miles, with just the cane on uneven pavement and nothing at all on the flat stretches of the neighborhood. I have my coffee on the back porch when the weather allows. I read. I have started, at Carol's suggestion, attending a gentle yoga class on Tuesday mornings at the community center, where I am by no means the oldest person in the room, which is a comfort. Lily has claimed the corner of my backyard near the oak tree as what she calls her thinking spot, and several times a week I look out my window and see a small girl sitting cross-legged under that tree with the particular concentrated expression of someone working through something important. Derek and I talk. It is different now, but it is real in a way it wasn't before. He doesn't mention the house anymore. He comes for dinner sometimes, and we sit on the porch, and we talk about his work and my walks, and the cardinal, and there are moments when he looks at me in a way that tells me he is still figuring out how to live with what he did, and I don't try to make it easier than it is. That would be a kindness, but not the right kind. He told me once, in the fall, after we had been sitting quietly for a while, "I think about it, the hospital." I said, "I know you do. I think about you on that floor," he said. He had never said this before the ambulance. Alone, I said. Don't think about that. I can't help it. Then let it be useful, I said. Let it be the thing that tells you who you want to be from now on. That's what hard things are for. He was quiet. Then he nodded, slowly. The way people nod when something lands somewhere it needed to land. The oak tree has new growth on it this year, higher than before. Robert planted it as a sapling, a thing you could circle with one hand, and now it is something you would need 4 people to reach around. This is simply what happens when you give something good soil and enough time. You don't have to do very much. You just have to not cut it down. I am 63 years old. I have a fractured femoral neck that healed clean and a walker I no longer need, and a house that will go, when I am gone, to a woman 3 doors down who brought me soup when it mattered. I have a son I love, and a relationship with him that is more honest than it has ever been, which is not the same as easier, but is, I think, better. I have a cardinal in my oak tree and a 6-year-old who has decided the corner of my yard belongs to her and who explained to me last Saturday, with great authority, that she has figured out what the bird is saying. What's it saying? I asked. She thought about it very seriously. That it's been here the whole time, she said, and it's not leaving. I told her I thought that was probably right.